Hi, uh, I am Janet Fitch, and if it is noon on Wednesday Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and whatever time it is in your time zone, this is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, your craft questions, your doubts, insecurities, literary questions, business questions, existential questions. And if you have questions for me in between Writing Wednesdays, write to me at my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and there is a contact form that you can fill out and send me a question, and I will answer it. And believe me, if you have a problem, many other people have the same problem. Um, and if you have questions for me today, put them in the chat, and I can answer them as we go along. Um, and and subscribe. If you're enjoying these, please subscribe. It encouraged me to keep doing it every Wednesday, as I have for 5 years. So I have some uh, almost 300 videos going for you, which are archived here on YouTube. And you can find your own issues and answers to frequently asked questions. Okay, well, welcome. Hi, Amy. Good to see you. Glad you're here. We did have a loss in the literary community here in Los Angeles. Hi, Lisa. Uh, an interviewer for KCRW, Michael Silverblatt, who had a show called Bookworm. Uh, and he interviewed, I think, they said 1,600 authors about their books. He was an extremely conscientious reader. Um, he took it upon himself to read everything the person had written before the interview. So he did nothing but read. I got some wonderful reading tips from him years ago. Hi, Hope. Good to see you. Uh, uh, very the one thing I wanted to know is how did he read all those books? I mean, physically, where did he, you know, how did he read, where did he read, and so forth. And he said that his trick was he never read in bed because he believed that reading in bed is a signal to go to sleep, and you don't want to be sleepy when you're reading. You want to be very alert. So he would read always in a chair with a reading light. Um, and so I don't read in bed that much. I tend to, it's true, I go to sleep. So it inspired me to make sure my reading is vertical with a good light. I had a wonderful, used to be a wonderful little handheld reading light called the Beam and Read. I got him one just so it would be a little easier. I use it all the time. Lisa says I met Michael many times. He was incredible. Yeah, Hope says he's reading everything in heaven. Yeah, he's reading everything. Nobody loved books as much as that guy, and nobody uh, lived in literature the way he does. In other news, the book world, New York, the Washington Post's book section uh, is no more, and Ron Charles, their amazing reviewer, one of the last great names in book reviewing, is had been let go, which is shocking, shocking. I mean, this guy is just like a pillar of American literature or literature of our times. And but he has a Substack, and if you are going to do any book related Substack, I would subscribe to his. It is he's still reviewing, and he's thoroughgoing. He's also on Goodreads if you want to see any of his stuff. He usually has like the beginning is on Goodreads, and then there'll be a link to his uh, Washington Post, and now it would be the New York, it would be Substack, so you can read the rest of it. But he's very generous. He's not just reading high-end stuff. He reads across the board, um, and is wonderful reviewer to follow. Um, so here we are at Writing Wednesday, and we have a question here, which is, um, what separates, this is a little question before, I'm going to do a talk on numbers and systems, which really interests me. But I did have a quick question, which is, what separates a writer with potential for one who becomes a published author with results? Um, I've been teaching a long time, and I can be in a class where there can be somebody who's like the standout genius, just comes down from heaven and that's the way they are. And then I can have people who, B student, like myself, B student, but they really want it and they really want it and they're going to pick up every scrap of information, like you guys. They're going to pick up every scrap of information that comes their way and they're going to run with it. And they want it really, really badly. And who do you think ends up the published author? I have had so many people pass through my hands who are absolutely brilliant. They got a short story published, they might get a collection published, and that's enough for them. And then they go off and do something else, which is totally legitimate. You know, literature is the worst for it, but they find something else to do. Perhaps it's a great paying gig. They go into finance or something, something like that, or they have kids and they get, drawn into that world, um, because they didn't want it enough. So the difference to me between the writer with potential and the one who becomes the published author is wanting it really badly, so that in your down times, you don't forget what you're doing there. There's something about that burning ambition that is a necessary component to getting over the hump. You stay with it when you're rejected. You stay with it when, you know, growing kids and marital problems and what have you. You stay with it because it's an integral part of your identity, of part of your life. You can't take it or leave it. Whereas sometimes people who have more potential, who are truly amazing, they don't have that ambition. They don't feel it as intensely all day long, all day long, all day long. Um, they can take it or leave it. Often people who are multiply talented, they can write, or they can be a banker, or they can paint, or they can, you know, sail around the world. I mean, you know, the more things you're good at, the more dangerous it is. There's a wonderful movie. I'm trying to remember. It's probably a Woody Allen movie with three, sisters on the East Coast. Um, and one of them just is the middle one is the troubled one. And she can do all kinds of things. She's really good at all kinds of things, but she can't choose one. She drifts. And people call that a dilettante, but I don't, because dilettantism it's more hobbyism. Oh, I think I'll try that. Oh, I think I'll try that with no emotional investment. This is a person who um, deeply wants to be involved with something, but simply cannot settle on something because she's good at everything. Um, and so, what do we learn from this? Of course, is that you have to choose and commit to something deeply, and not second guess yourself the first time it goes south. Um, if you are somebody who gets discouraged or or bored. You know, I certainly know someone who is probably the most creative person I know, who can go from, I mean, she seizes on something. She's absolutely committed while she's doing it. But then she gets to a point that is going to require like the next step of commitment. Um, and that's where she loses interest because it's going to be too much of an extension, too much dropping of all these other things she does. It seems too much of a flight, too different to fully engage that way. And, so she goes through a series of passions, but they are passions. They are not, it's not dilettantism. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to throw some pots, or wouldn't it be nice to paint a little bit? So she's very engaged while she's engaged, but she has a limit to her, she gets bored and things start to seem too much of a business, too much of a commitment. Whereas the people who are, flamingly ambitious, they're not going to forget. They're not going, when something's hard and there's going to be a bunch of hoops to jump through, they don't balk. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever you have to do to me to let me do this, um, let me at it. Um, so, Hope says fascists are bad about art. Look at the fit they threw over Bad Bunny. Yeah, fascists don't understand art. Art is to develop our humanity. There's a ground note to it. There's a reason for it. We flourish as people, and um, you know, fascists. Somebody who has that narrow view. Developing their humanity is the last thing they want to do. And anybody who's interested in that is the last thing. They're interested in power and the worship of power. And art, that's not what art's about. Art's about humanity. And they're not interested in humanity. And they're not interested in people who are interested in humanity. They're absolutely against them because the they erode that project of worship of power. They say, well, wait a second, let's look at how it's hurting people, or let's look at the backside of that, and what kind of people are into that. They don't want to know what kind of people are into that. They don't want to examine their project internally. That's the last thing we want to do. So of course, what did Woody Guthrie had on his guitar? This guitar kills fascists. Yeah. Um, yeah, not giving up, Hope says. Amy says the tortoise. So it's the tortoise. You need that stick to itiveness, you know, but you also it's the passion for it, the need for it. Um, I mean, in class, it's the person who wants it badly. Um, and even sometimes less promising writers who just really want it will end up publishing what they do, and it might not be, something I would want to read, but they stick to it until it happens for them. And the more promising students who are taking on, so that's the key. It's not just the ambition. It can't just be raw ambition. It has to be the willingness to get better and knowing that you're not that, if you're not that good, it's like, how do I get better? How do I get better? How do I get better? Not just how do I break in? How do I find the club? How do I find the party? How do I hang out with the right people? It's an art form. And so the commitment is to the art form, not just to the success of yourself as a practitioner, but the success of your work is not just connections and not just external stuff, but you have to want to be better and just crave it and want it. And you know, um, and that person who's willing to take on, I can see it in classes where you get somebody who's not very good to begin with, but they're avid to take on things and try it, try it, try it, try it, push, push, push. They'll do the exercises. They'll do more than you ask for because they want it and they want to get better. They know they're not there yet. So that's not the same as a super ambitious person who just wants to be famous or just wants to be sell a billion books. It's not the same mindset. Um, So let's see. Hannah and her sisters. That's the three sisters, where the middle one, played by Mary Beth Hurt, I think. It, she's talented in many directions, but she can't choose. So she flounders. That's an example of somebody who just needs to. She has the she has the too much doubt that keeps her from choosing one and fully committing to it. Um, it's like the person who's dating like really great people but can't pick and is always on, you know, swiping, looking for somebody else. No. Um, Hope says, I didn't start getting published until years after I started writing at school. Yeah, yeah. Um, Amy says, if you have time today, can you speak to the in close third authorial voice? I want to keep that voice off stage as it seems to interrupt. Who is it? The authorial voice. You know what, Amy? I think that's going to be a separate Writing Wednesday. That's a whole topic of itself. Authorial voice. And then I can take a look at a bunch of different ways it's handled. And that's a really good question. Hey, Wendy. Hey, Marie. Oh, good. We're all here. Um, so, what I wanted to talk about today, I have a question. It was about numbers and systems, which means we tend to forget the range of possibilities when we're writing our stories. We tend to it's a story about this guy and his sister, and what often can sharpen up your approach to a subject. We'll start with with an exercise, and the exercise is to think in terms of systems, and then how would you use that system in writing fiction? There's a guy named Jeff Jackson who used to post these wonderful things on Instagram that were writing prompts. So it was like write this as a shape, as a form, and there would be a picture of a flooded hallway. He didn't mean write a story about a flooded hallway. He meant to use that shape, the reflection, as a form. So, say you might write a little story using a clarity in the first part, and then the image becomes flipped over. And what would that mean in terms of a story? To flip the story over so it's like a reflection in water. Um, that is a really useful kind of thing. Um, so I made a list of things that I thought would be really interesting shapes, really interesting forms for. First, you do these as exercises, and but you're building muscle so that when you're designing a scene, you start to incorporate other things that another shape uh, that you might not have challenged yourself to include. Um, I'll give you an example. Like, here's the zodiac. So the system of the zodiac. Um, 12, you can say 12 personality types. Um, what, who would interact in a scene? So who would be those 12 people? And how would they interact the scene? I have a feeling uh, that Zelazny's Nine Prisons in Amber might have been formulated that way with a system like that. They're each an archetype. It's like you could use the engram. I'm not really up on the engram. I don't really know how that you would assign, but you would assign different characters one of the engram numbers, or in this case, a zodiac, and say, okay, Charlie is our Aquarius. You can start with any one of them, right? You could start with, say, the Aries, the first sign, and say, okay, here's Bill, and he's like this. So if Bill is like that, then who's your Taurus? Okay, that's Emma, and Emma's like this, and she interacts with. How would she interact with Bill? And then you pick your whatever the third one is, Gemini. So who's your Gemini, and how are these family members? Are these co-workers? How do you put them together? And you start creating characters to orchestrate that. It's like Olympus. By the time you're done, you're going to have like the gods of Olympus, or that kind of a chorus of players, group of players. A team could be like that. I like office workers. I would go for that, an office based on the zodiac and how do they interact. To me, that's very stimulating. Um, the hours of the day. That was an actual exercise that my teacher, Kate Braverman, used to give out. Um, is to mark, like the Chinese do, the hours of the day for the the signs of the Chinese zodiac. But I think it's very interesting just to do it as an exercise. And what is 2 in the morning? It's the hour of a really good party still raging. It's the hour of, you know, forgot to close the garage door. The hour of, how am I ever going to cover those bills? Um, what is 2 in the morning? What is 3 in the morning? What is 4 in the morning? You know, um, and it doesn't have to be, uh, and it shouldn't necessarily be what um, we would expect. I remember, and it'll come apart. You'll be able to use any part of it in your writing. So it's ammunition. It's money in the bank. Um, I remember there's a poem that Anne Sexton writes about her daughter, my string bean. Um, this my something, my string bean, and it's about her growing daughter, and it has a line that's um, noon the ghost hour. I mean, very few people would think noon the ghost hour, but if you start doing the hours of the day and what are they, you can give just one of the hours to a character to think about, to have. I mean, there's a depth to this practice that I think will fill your coffers better than just about anything. Well, most prompts are like that. Have to recommend that. Um, the Stations of the Cross. If you are um, have a character who is going through some sort of ordeal, and then you're aware what Station of the Cross is this. I mean, it could be the stranger the comparison, the more interesting it is. Say if it's uh, a single mother with a sick kid and another kid and another kid and a job and a whole list, and then do her Stations of the Cross. Very interesting. Um, so the engram, we've talked about the planets. Um, you know, if you're having a group just like the zodiac, you can have the group of planets and have them involved in your at Thanksgiving. And there's Venus, who's she sitting next to. Well, she sits next to Mercury, who's not particularly interested, and that pisses her off. And Earth is on the other side, you know, and she's not interested in Earth either. She's interested in Mars, who's sitting on the other side of Earth. So they're like trying to play footsie under the table as Earth is just trying to get the food on the table. I mean, it working with these systems really can inspire you to create clusters of phenomena, um, little, and then you can part them out and use them in your whatever it is you're working on, or you can create a group of scenes, you can create a group of characters, you can create you know related short stories, so they become like an ensemble of short stories. You can tell a story about Venus and Earth and Mars, and never even mention what it is you're doing. You don't even have to mention that it has an underlying system. You can just present these stories, and then usually an attentive reader can find the underlying, and it's really fun for them. Sometimes the title suggests it. Then there's things like, if anybody's read Primo Levi's The Periodic Table, he he was a chemist, and he was put in a forced labor camp, um, working, making paint and stuff like that for the Nazis. Um, and he has a story about, I think there's 10 or 12, um, let's see, I need to turn my back to you, but let me grab the periodic tables. Benefit of alphabetical order. The periodic table by Primo Levi. So looks like that. So we have argon, hydrogen, zinc, iron, potassium, nickel, lead, mercury, phosphorus, gold, cerium, chromium, sulfur, titanium, arsenic, nitrogen, tin, uranium, silver, vanadium, and carbon. And each of them has a story related. So anything in your life that has a system, to use that as a framework for a series of short pieces. Um, the reader likes systems. The reader feels held when they know that, oh yeah, this is going to be the elements, or this is going to be the zodiac, or this is going to be to have some framework. Readers are very attracted to this kind of thing. Um, there's a book that I am insanely in love with that my husband and I have given away to, we've probably given away 10 copies of this book. The Suitcase by Sergei Dovlatov. And it's about a guy who's uh, emigrated from Russia, and he was only allowed to take he was allowed to take 2 suitcases or 3 suitcases full of stuff. But when he started packing, he realized, there was only one suitcase he needed. He only needed one. Threw a few things in there and emigrated. And then when he came to America, he realized, I'm not going to need any of this stuff. Threw the suitcase in the closet. A few years later, several years later, he has a daughter, American daughter, I think, uh, who drags the suitcase out and goes, "Well, what the hell is in here?" And there are a like 7 items in the suitcase. Let's see. Oh no, yeah. There's one, two, three, four. This is a 6, 7, 8. There are 8 items, and this is such a funny book. It is so funny. If you think Russians aren't funny, they can be very funny, but in a very gloomy way. It's um, and the story behind these 8 objects that are in the suitcase are so brilliant. So, a limited group of things that's in one suitcase. Can you tell the story of, say, do you have items that are in, say, your roll top desk, from your grandmother? And what are the items in there? And there's a story often behind each one of them. So tell those stories. Um, uh, Numerology. I don't know if anybody, you can tell I like I like systems, and whether it's true or not is not my province. I don't care so much. I'm more interested in the fact that there is this system. So numerology, each number has an emotional tenor to it. It has you know, in the system that I've read up on, like 1 is the number of will, 2 is the number of obviously partnerships, and there's like a moon quality to it, a kind of soft, wavery quality to it. 3 is Jupiter, the big guy, and sure of himself and so forth. And 4 is, in this system, 4 and 8 are not the most auspicious numbers, dealing with Uranus and Neptune. Um, you don't need to know all this, but if you like to use numerology to write, um, to write characters based on that, or a situation based on that, that would be a very interesting collection. Poems. Um, Oh, Hope says, every year I enter a contest the cemetery puts on. You pick a person buried there and write a short story about them. That's very interesting. Um, so systems really are generative. The 4 humors. Does anybody know what those are? The 4 humors. This was medieval thinking about personality and health. The 4 humors are choleric, um, sanguine, um, melancholic, and uh, phlegmatic. And these personality types are the hero, choleric, the sanguine is the yippee skippy, yay. The melancholic is like, yeah, this too. When is it going to stop? And the phlegmatic is cool. Let's have lunch. So they're related to the medieval bodily kinds of fluids they used to think determine your personality. So phlegmatic. Uh, but they're people who are calm. They're calm and they take things easy and they like to eat. Um, and so you could see taking those four people and having a story about like four old ladies sitting on the park bench, and they each manifest the different personalities. Uh, the four Beatles, you know, to have four kids skate at the skate park or whatever, and there's a Paul and a John and a George and a Ringo. And, I remember the days where, one's parents couldn't tell the difference between them. But to us, it was like, that they were archetypes. They were so distinct in personality. You'd never confuse Ringo and John. Um, and also, girls, it's like they would have their crush. So, which of the four Beatles is your crush? Says something about you. Do you like the adventurous, sarcastic John, challenging? Do you like the romantic Paul, who's the pop guy and the puppy dog? Um, we didn't know like Paul was the mainstay of the group. Uh, but we knew how adorable he was. And then, are you a George? Are you the different girl? Do you like the odd one? Do you like the kind of introspective one? Or are you Ringo? Do you like the mainstay, the backbeat, you know, the not challenging, the peacemaker, the one who brought everybody together and kept the beat? Um, different. You were a different girl, depending on which Beatle you liked. So that's uh, there's there's a whole group of stories there. Um, but you can also have a group of four people, each of them in those different types, and have them interacting. Four siblings. Um, the nine muses are wonderful. I could see a series of short stories, one for each muse. I could see the muses interacting. But there's something about nine. Then you can have scenes of, you can have the party that goes amiss, or the girls in the dorm, the group. Um, so think about systems and how you might adapt them to the purposes of fiction. You could do constellations like the Seven Sisters, Hope says. Wow, that's a great idea. Llewellyn says Greek theater, the four humors. Indeed. Um, he says, I've just finished writing a novel where all the characters have health issues. Well, that's interesting. Um, the games that are inherent in the uh, work of the Oulipo group in France, Oulipo. Uh, they play games. The surrealists did too. They loved setting up games, and in Life a User's Manual, which I suggest one read about before one attempts to read it at all, because it takes a while to figure out what he's doing, if ever. It's a game, and so every chapter has things he has to do and things he can't do, and things. So it's a system like this, but they're layered. There's more than one part of the game. So, and every it's a description of every room in a French apartment house. The just the contents of the room. It's 500 pages long. And it takes a while to figure out if ever. You might as well read about it. You're not cheating because you're not getting a grade. Um, it's done on the Knight's Gambit, so it'll be, you know, the Fabergé's bathroom, their guest bathroom, and then it'll go down to Mrs. Levinsky's sitting room, and then it'll go to so and so's kitchen, and but as you read, you start to get a whole picture of the life of this apartment house, and the poorer people live on the upper floors because there was no elevator in those days. So servants, artists up on the top floor, and then as you move down, people become more affluent until you get to the premier étage, which is not the ground floor, but the first floor that has the big windows. You see that in a French apartment house, who are the hot bourgeois families there. Um, but as you get into it, it's just describing the contents of the rooms, not the people. But you do get the people because of the contents. And you start to see like who collaborated with the Nazis and then who still remember, who still hates them. Um, the long memories of the apartment house. Yeah, it's so good. So Sarah, hi Sarah. Sarah says exercises in style by Queneau, Queneau, Queneau is my favorite Oulipo work. I've never read that. So there's a note for me as well. Exercises in style. So think of numbers. Think of numbers, things that are clustered in numbers, and then and you don't have to actually write these, but as an exercise, think of how you would create this. You What kind of a book would you create with this as a form? The days of the week, um, the seven stages of man, the Shakespearean. Um, what else is a good? The Seven Sisters, Hope has already said. Constellations. That's really interesting. Lisa says, we'll watch the remaining lit. Oh, she has to dash. Cool. Take it easy, Lisa. We'll see you soon. Yeah, Lisa is involved with the artist, with the poet Anne Waldman, who is a wonderful incantatory poet. So, "Fast Speaking Woman" is one of her great poems, and I think you must be able to see that on the internet somehow. Her doing that. Um, but anything that comes in series or groups, food groups, wouldn't that be funny? Right, imagine a collection of short stories based on the food groups. um, what other things come in numerical groups that you could base a short story or an exercise? You do this exercise like the hours of the day, and then you'll find yourself using that stuff in your own writing. You use it all the time. So we have reached the end of it looks like at the end of this, and we have our topic for next week, which is speak to authorial voice in close third. So that is a really good topic and definitely needed its own space. So I thank you for coming and hit the subscribe button if you feel it's justified. And we will see you next week. So good writing and thank you. Okie doke. Bye. Vente grande and tall, Amy says. Very good. Okay, thank you. Bye.